Have you ever seen a man stare into the woods like they might stare back? A frost-covered cabin, a steaming mug left untouched, and a German shepherd with eyes fixed not on the sunrise, but something deeper, something coming. This is the story of a soldier who thought he'd left war behind, until his dog led him to a buried machine and a secret that would burn the forest down around them. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in the quiet courage of those who never stop fighting for truth, this story is for you. The first frost of October had laid its thin white veil across the mountain valley, shimmering faintly in the fragile dawn. Montana's Bitterroot Range stretched endlessly, its ridgelines dark and sharp against a paling sky, as if carved by a patient hand centuries ago. Cold air drifted from the peaks, sliding down into the hollows like liquid glass, carrying with it the smell of pine, damp stone, and distant snow. In that lonely vastness stood a solitary log cabin, its chimney coughing pale smoke into the waking sky. To anyone passing on the old timber road, the place might have seemed idyllic, a retreat carved out of wilderness. But to Gabriel Harlow, the man who lived there, it was less a sanctuary and more a fortress of silence, built plank by plank to keep the world away. Gabriel was 42, though life had carved him older. His frame was lean but tough, muscle bound tight from years of service and months of chopping wood, hauling water, and walking miles of unforgiving terrain. His face bore the marks of a soldier who had seen too much and spoken too little. A square jaw dusted with rough stubble, crow's feet at the edges of storm-gray eyes that once scanned deserts for ambushes and now scanned tree lines for deer. Short brown hair, already touched with silver, clung close to his scalp, as though even his hair understood discipline. He wore a plaid flannel shirt, softened by time, denim jeans faded from years of wear, and boots scarred by both sand and snow. A man of habit, a man of ghosts. On the porch, Gabriel lifted a chipped enamel mug of coffee, its steam curling like a ghost into the chill morning. He stared at the tree line, not really seeing it. In his mind's eye, the horizon was always two places at once, the pine ridges of Montana and the arid ridges of Afghanistan. Memories intruded without mercy. The crack of distant gunfire hidden in the snap of burning logs, the tremor of helicopter blades echoing in the gust of mountain wind. He clenched his jaw, tightened his grip on the mug, and exhaled slowly. At his feet lay Rook. The German shepherd was 4 years old, coat black and silver like smoke and steel, eyes a molten amber that reflected not only the forest, but the inner turmoil of the man above him. Muscular yet lithe, Rook carried himself with the precision of a trained guardian, though no drill sergeant had ever commanded him, only the bond he shared with Gabriel. The dog had been plucked from a local shelter years ago, a gangly pup who had grown into a creature of quiet strength. Now he thumped his tail softly against the wooden planks, sensing the weight in Gabriel's silence, offering presence rather than intrusion. "You feel it too, don't you?" Gabriel murmured. His voice was low, a gravelly timbre, as though each word had been dragged through sand before being spoken. Rook tilted his head, ears twitching. Gabriel reached down, pressing his calloused hand into the dog's thick ruff. The warmth of living fur steadied him, as it always did. For all his self-imposed exile, Gabriel was not immune to the pull of routine. Each week he and Rook vanished into the forest for hunting trips that served less for meat and more for therapy. Out there, Gabriel could lose himself in the purity of survival, tracking signs, reading wind, testing instincts. Out there, the ghosts sometimes grew quieter. That morning, as the sun spilled orange across the peaks, Gabriel set down his mug and stretched, joints cracking in protest. "Come on, boy," he said. "Time to see what the woods have for us." Rook leapt to his feet, tail wagging with anticipation. Inside, the cabin was modest. One room dominated by a stone hearth, shelves of neatly stacked provisions, and a bedroll that never looked slept in, only endured. Gabriel moved with soldierly precision, checking his bolt-action rifle with the reverence of a man for whom a weapon was both lifeline and burden. He packed rations, a compass, water filter, and an old topographic map creased at the edges. Rook watched every move, occasionally nudging Gabriel's hand as if urging him to hurry. By mid-morning, they left the clearing, stepping into a cathedral of trees. The forest swallowed them quickly, towering pines rising like pillars, maples bleeding gold and crimson across the canopy. The air grew cool and damp, muffling the world into stillness. Their footsteps crunched on the litter of old leaves, mingled with the distant cry of a raven. To Gabriel, it was music. To Rook, it was territory. They moved for hours, weaving through gullies and ridges, Gabriel reading deer tracks in soft earth, while Rook's nose quivered at scents far older than men. The rhythm settled them both. When the sun angled low, casting long shadows like prison bars across the forest floor, Gabriel spotted fresh hoofprints. He knelt, brushing the soil, whispering, "Big one! We'll track him slow." But Rook was not listening. His ears pricked forward, his body stiffened, and a low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Gabriel froze, scanning for bear or wolf. The prince led straight ahead, but Rook turned sharply, nose locked toward a darker tangle of brush where vines and thorns grew thick. Then, breaking discipline, Rook barked, sharp, insistent, unlike the restrained silence of a hunt. He pulled against an invisible leash, urging Gabriel off the deer trail. Gabriel's instincts told him to resist. Years of discipline had trained him to follow the known sign, not wander into shadows. Yet trust in Rook was deeper than instinct. It was survival. He rose, slung the rifle across his back, and whispered, "All right, show me." The descent into the ravine was steep, moss slick beneath his boots. Branches clawed at his flannel, thorns scratched his forearms, but Rook moved with sure-footed urgency, pausing only to glance back and confirm his master followed. The air grew heavier, tinged with the smell of damp iron. Then, Gabriel saw it, a break in the vegetation, a long, unnatural scar where trees had once snapped like matchsticks. At the bottom, hidden beneath curtains of vine and ivy, loomed a hulking shape. Gabriel stopped, breath catching. What at first seemed stone revealed itself as metal, dark, rusted, bent into grotesque angles. His pulse quickened. He stepped forward, pulling away vines until the shape became undeniable. A rotor hub jutted like a broken crown. The long tail boom lay twisted, half buried in soil. Shattered glass glinted faintly where the cockpit lay, crushed against the earth. A Black Hawk helicopter. Time seemed to collapse. Gabriel's mind reeled with memories of whirring blades, of dust storms and desert fire. He swallowed hard, fighting the old panic. Beside him, Rook went silent, ears lowered, eyes locked on the relic of war, as though he too understood its weight. Gabriel exhaled, voice rough. "What in God's name are you doing here?" He stepped closer, hand brushing against cold steel. The ghost of a machine that once carried men like him across hostile skies. Now it lay entombed, swallowed by forest, forgotten by history. And in that moment, Gabriel knew the solitude he had built was about to shatter. The light within the ravine was a strange kind of twilight, as though the forest canopy above refused to surrender more than fragments of daylight. The air was colder here, damp and heavy, carrying the odor of rust and moss mixed with something fainter, older, the unmistakable tang of oil, long dried and forgotten. Gabriel Harlow stood motionless for several heartbeats, his breath slow but uneven, watching the tangled wreck before him. Rook shifted restlessly at his side, the dog's hackles still raised, his body poised not in fear but in alert recognition, as if he knew the metal carcass was no mere relic. Gabriel forced himself to move closer. He pushed aside the veils of ivy that had crept greedily across the machine, revealing more of its broken shape. The fuselage was canted at a brutal angle, tail boom twisted upward like a grotesque finger pointing to the heavens. The cockpit lay partly embedded in the earth, its windows shattered into a mosaic of jagged shards. Though muted by years of decay, the shape was unmistakable to a Marine who had seen such silhouettes slicing the skies in war zones. Black Hawk, a bird of war, now a ghost sleeping in the soil of Montana. He swallowed against the sudden rush of memory, dust storms in Helmand Province, the rotor wash stinging his eyes, comrades shouting over the thundering blades. But this was not Afghanistan. This was his forest, his refuge, And yet, war had found him here all the same. Rook whined, drawing Gabriel's gaze downward. The German shepherd was circling the nose of the wreck, nose pressed to the earth, sniffing with frantic concentration. His body trembled with urgency, ears twitching as though hearing something that lived only in memory. Gabriel crouched beside him, laying a steadying hand on his flank. "Easy, boy. We'll see what's here." He rose and approached the cockpit. Through the broken glass, dim light revealed the contours within, a tangle of twisted controls, seats torn and blackened, vines curling through like green veins reclaiming the skeleton of a beast. Then his stomach clenched. There, slumped against the pilot's harness, was a shape no foliage could disguise. Bone. A skull tilted forward, the jaw frozen in silent surrender. The tattered remnants of a flight suit clung to the skeletal frame, its insignia bleached beyond recognition. Gabriel removed his cap and lowered his head. Even after years of death on battlefields, the sight of a fellow soldier abandoned in silence struck him harder than any ambush. He whispered under his breath, a prayer unpolished but sincere. "Rest easy, brother. You deserved better." Rook pressed closer to the cockpit, pawing at the metal floor just beneath the pedals. His claws scraped against something hollow, producing a faint metallic echo. Gabriel frowned. "What is it, boy?" The dog's growl deepened, not in aggression, but insistence. He scratched harder, sending flakes of rust tumbling into the shadows. Gabriel slung his rifle across his back and climbed carefully into the cockpit. The metal groaned under his weight, but years of weather had fused wreck to earth. It held firm. He knelt beside the dog's chosen spot and rapped his knuckles against the floor. A dull reverberation answered. Hollow. He drew his hunting knife, wedging its tip into the seam Rook had exposed. With a sharp twist, the panel popped loose. Dust billowed, and within the cavity lay something wrapped in waterproof plastic. His hands closed around it and pulled free a rectangular object, heavier than expected. Stripping away the covering, he revealed a ruggedized military hard drive, its casing olive drab, scratched but intact. A surge of adrenaline coursed through him. This was no part of standard equipment. Someone had hidden it deliberately, ensuring it remained long after the pilot's death. "Good work, Rook," Gabriel murmured. The shepherd thumped his tail once against the metal, amber eyes locked on his master with a kind of triumph. Beside the hidden drive lay another object, wedged tightly under the seat frame. Gabriel tugged until it came loose. A black gear case, standard issue but locked with a heavy combination clasp. Its surface was dented, edges scorched, yet it bore the unmistakable aura of secrecy. He placed it gently on the moss outside the wreck, studying both finds with a soldier's suspicion. The drive pulsed with the weight of information. The case hummed with questions. He looked back at the skeletal remains, guilt pressing in. Whoever this pilot had been, he had guarded these things with his final breath. Gabriel touched the brittle fabric of the man's sleeve, promising silently that the sacrifice would not rot here unseen. For several minutes, Gabriel lingered in the cockpit, scanning the twisted instruments, searching for any hint of identity. A name patch, faded almost to nothing, still clung to the torn flight suit. Reeve, perhaps, though the letters were half erased by time. He repeated it softly, a gesture of respect. Then he climbed back out, retrieving the case and drive. The forest around him was too still, as though it too watched. Rook pressed close, his body language protective, his gaze constantly flicking from shadows to treetops. Gabriel slung his pack open, slipping the drive into a dry pouch and the case beside it, his heart hammered with an unfamiliar rhythm. Hunting deer was one thing, hunting secrets was another, and secrets of this kind carried teeth sharper than wolves. He rose to his full height, scanning the ravine. No movement, only the rustle of leaves high above, indifferent to the intrusion of men and machines. He exhaled slowly, his voice steady, though his pulse was not. "All right, boy, we've got what we came for, even if we didn't know we were coming for it. Let's get out before the forest decides to remember." Rook barked once sharply as if to seal the vow. Together, man and dog turned from the tomb of steel, carrying with them the ghost of a pilot, a secret encased in metal, and the first tremors of a storm that would soon swallow them whole. The light was fading fast when Gabriel and Rook climbed back toward the clearing where their cabin crouched against the slope of the Bitterroot Range. The sky was the color of ash and violet, streaked with the long fingers of dying sunlight, and the air carried the sharp smell of pine needles crushed underfoot. The cold crept more quickly after sundown, slithering through the seams of his flannel shirt, and Gabriel pulled the collar higher against his throat as he trudged up the last incline. His pack, now heavier with the weight of the drive and locked case, bit against his shoulders. Rook bounded ahead, tail low but wagging with restless energy, nose twitching at scents along the path. His loyalty was an anchor, his presence a constant reassurance that Gabriel was not entirely alone in this wilderness. Yet tonight, as they neared the cabin, Gabriel could not shake the sense that the forest had eyes. Each rustle of branches, each cry of an owl seemed sharpened, as though the woods themselves understood he had disturbed something that had slept too long. Inside the cabin, the hearth was cold. Gabriel set about kindling a fire, his movements brisk but efficient. He hung the kettle above the flames and lowered himself at the worn wooden table where his old laptop waited. A relic, much like himself, but reliable. He drew the drive from its pouch, its surface still damp with the condensation of the ravine. Rook settled at his boots, amber eyes glowing in the firelight, ears swiveling at every creak. With a steadying breath, Gabriel plugged the drive into the laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the machine hummed and the screen flickered alive. An unfamiliar icon appeared, a sterile rectangle marked only with a string of numbers. He clicked it, and the display filled with a wall of encryption, symbols cascading like rain. "Damn," Gabriel muttered. This was no simple archive. It was military grade, layers upon layers of defenses designed to keep secrets buried. His fingers moved almost on instinct, summoning fragments of training from long ago, protocols, codes, substitution ciphers whispered about in briefing tents. He tried combinations, dates, unit numbers, but the walls held firm. Frustration built in his chest, old ghosts whispering that he should have left it in the forest. Yet when he looked down, Rook had pressed his great head against Gabriel's leg, eyes patient, as if reminding him that persistence had saved them before. Gabriel exhaled slowly. "All right, boy. We don't quit that easy." He closed his eyes and replayed every detail of the wreck. The torn fabric of the flight suit, the faint letters of a name patch, the bones strapped faithfully to the seat. He remembered the small locked case wedged beneath the frame and the stubborn refusal of the vines to surrender what they hid. And then it came to him. Soldiers often stitch small keepsakes or codes into their gear, ways to safeguard information when trust was scarce. Maybe this pilot had done the same. Gabriel's pulse quickened. Tomorrow he would return to the site and search again. For now, he copied what fragments he could, saving strings of code onto the laptop's meager storage. The fire crackled. Outside, the forest moaned with the rising wind. Gabriel leaned back, pinched the bridge of his nose, and whispered, "What were you trying to tell us, brother?" Rook lifted his head and gave a low whine, sensing his master's unease. Gabriel dropped a hand to stroke the dog's fur, rough and warm beneath his fingers. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, we'll figure it out." Far beyond the cabin, in the modest town that lay at the foot of the range, Claire Jennings stared at the empty newsroom of her paper. Once, it had been alive with chatter, the clatter of typewriters and the shuffle of editors debating headlines. Now, only one desk lamp glowed against the gloom, casting her sharp features into planes of light and shadow. She was 39, with auburn hair pinned carelessly at her nape, and eyes the color of cold slate, eyes that had seen both grief and fire. Her latest editorial lay on the desk before her, a scathing accusation that Aegis Security Solutions, one of the country's largest contractors, was profiting from weapons shipments meant for Allied bases overseas. She had written with passion, fueled by whispers from anonymous sources, but she had no proof. Proof was the fortress she lacked, and without it, her words were dismissed as speculation, or worse, as vendetta. The phone rang once, sharp in the silence. She answered, heart already braced. A man's voice, distorted, said simply, "Stop digging, Ms. Jennings, for your own good." The line went dead before she could reply. She sat frozen, the receiver pressed to her ear, listening to the empty hum. Claire replaced the phone slowly, her hands trembling only slightly. She had received threats before, but this one carried the weight of inevitability. Still, she picked up her pen and scrawled across her notebook. If they want silence this badly, then the truth is real. Back in the cabin, Gabriel sat before the flickering screen until the fire sank low to embers. He had tried every code he could recall, every number stitched into memory, but the drive remained locked. Yet his instincts told him the solution was not here on the screen, but still hidden in the wreck itself. Tomorrow, he would go back. He shut the laptop, secured the drive inside an oilskin pouch, and stowed it beneath the floorboards where he kept his rifle cartridges. Rook watched every motion, his head tilted, his tail sweeping the floorboards once in quiet approval. Gabriel crouched beside him. "Whatever's in that thing, it's bigger than us, boy." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And it's gonna change everything." Rook pressed his head against Gabriel's chest, the steady beat of his heart, grounding the words. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters like distant gunfire, and Gabriel's storm-gray eyes narrowed toward the dark pines. He did not know yet that in a nearby town, a weary journalist was fighting the same invisible enemy. He only knew that war, long buried, was waking again beneath the mountains. The dawn was pale and reluctant, the sky brushed in muted tones of pearl and faded rose, as if the mountains themselves were waking from uneasy dreams. Frost clung to the grasses along the trail, crunching faintly under Gabriel's boots as he retraced the path into the forest. The cold carried a sharper edge this morning, biting at his knuckles where the leather gloves had thinned. Beside him, Rook moved in a rhythm of quiet grace, tail lowered, nose darting from scent to scent. The German shepherd was unusually tense, ears twitching at sounds invisible to Gabriel, every step radiating alertness. Gabriel knew the feeling well. Something in the air had shifted. The woods no longer felt like the quiet sanctuary he had built his life around. They had become watchful, their silence too deliberate, as though every branch and crow held its breath for what lay ahead. They reached the ravine by mid-morning. The wreck still waited, draped in its blanket of vines and moss, as though the forest had tried overnight to reclaim what man had left broken. Gabriel climbed down with care, his boots sliding slightly on damp rock. Rook descended first, agile as ever, and went directly to the cockpit, his body stiff with intent. Inside, the skeleton remained in its seat, bones pale and fragile in the dim light. Gabriel crouched before it, whispering again the quiet respect of a soldier to another. He reached into the tattered flight suit, fingers brushing fabric stiff with age. At the collar, he felt an unnatural seam, heavier than stitching. With his knife, he sliced carefully, revealing a strip of polymer pressed flat, on which a string of numbers was printed. His breath caught. Codes, like breadcrumbs left for someone who might one day find them. Rook gave a soft bark, paws scratching at the floor again near the pedals, but Gabriel hushed him gently. "Already found your secret yesterday, buddy. Let's see what this one means." He slipped the polymer strip into his jacket pocket, then leaned back. The weight of responsibility pressed heavier with every discovery. This wasn't the work of chance. The pilot had known betrayal, had prepared for it, and had trusted some unseen future finder to carry the truth forward. As he climbed out of the wreck, Gabriel felt Rook stiffen suddenly, ears pinned forward. The dog growled, low and dangerous, toward the ridge above the ravine. Gabriel froze, rifle instinctively rising, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, only the whisper of leaves in the wind. Yet the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He retreated quickly, clutching his pack tighter. The walk back to the cabin was a blur of tension, his eyes never leaving the branches overhead, his ears straining for anything beyond the ordinary rhythm of the forest. By the time the cabin came into sight, the sky had deepened to an iron gray. He closed the heavy wooden door behind him, bolting it before kneeling at the table. With trembling fingers, he laid out the hard drive, the polymer strip, and the name patch he had torn from the pilot's suit. The patch was barely legible, but the letters REEVE could still be read. A name. A soldier's name. Booting up his laptop, Gabriel entered the letters alongside the code from the strip. For a moment, the cursor blinked, mocking him. Then the encryption screen shifted, collapsing into a clean directory of folders. His heart pounded. He was inside. He clicked the first file, what appeared to be shipping manifests. But the words made his skin crawl. Weapons not old or obsolete, but advanced, state-of-the-art, with destinations obscured by falsified routing numbers. The next folder contained audio recordings, muffled but clear enough. A woman's voice discussing shipments in cold, transactional tones, bargaining prices with an Eastern European accent on the other end. Gabriel sat back, the blood draining from his face. This was no bureaucratic mistake. This was treason. Rook stirred uneasily at his feet, whining low. Gabriel stroked his head absently. Yeah, I know. This is bigger than me. Meanwhile, in town, Claire Jennings pressed the receiver of her office phone to her ear, her jaw tight. Another anonymous call, another threat. But unlike the last, this one left something behind, a faint clicking, as though someone hadn't hung up properly. She recorded it, replayed it, and caught the background sound. A low hum, the kind she had heard only in the presence of drones or heavy machinery. Her pulse quickened. Could it be connected to the whispers she'd been chasing about Aegis security solutions? She jotted the detail into her notebook. Drones. Logistics base nearby? The threats weren't silencing her. They were sharpening her resolve. That night, as she left the office, headlights followed her down the deserted street. She quickened her pace, hand gripping the can of pepper spray in her coat pocket. But at the corner, the car turned away. Still, she understood. The walls were closing in, and soon she would need proof, real proof, or her fight would end in shadows. Back in the cabin, Gabriel sifted through more files. He clicked open a video log. Grainy footage filled the screen. A woman, late 40s, dark hair perfectly styled, seated behind a glass desk. Her nameplate read, Miranda Locke, CEO, Aegis Security Solutions. Gabriel's chest tightened as her voice filled the small cabin. Sharp, commanding, utterly devoid of conscience. She spoke of shipments, of deniability, of deliverables. He closed the file abruptly, bile rising in his throat. The truth was undeniable now, but it was also deadly. If Locke commanded power enough to move weapons like this, she commanded power enough to silence anyone who found out. Rook suddenly rose, body stiff, growl low and steady. Gabriel followed his gaze toward the shuttered window. Outside, the night had fallen full, and the forest lay shrouded in silence. He moved cautiously, easing the shutter open just enough to peer through. At first, he saw nothing. Then his breath caught. Above the tree line, barely visible against the star-flecked sky, hovered a small dark shape. It moved with unnatural smoothness, no sound but the faintest hum. A drone. Gabriel shut the shutter quickly, bolting it with shaking hands. He crouched beside Rook, whispering hoarsely, "They know." The German shepherd pressed close, his body a taut line of muscle, ready for whatever would come. The cabin, once his fortress, had become a beacon. The hunt had begun. The drone was gone by morning, but its memory hovered like smoke over the clearing. Gabriel hadn't slept, neither had Rook. The German shepherd lay coiled near the fireplace, muscles taut beneath his coat, his eyes never leaving the shuttered window. Every creak of wood or whisper of wind set his ears twitching, and Gabriel could feel it too, an electrical tension in the air, as if the forest itself held its breath. Gabriel stood at the cabin's small work table, disassembling the gear case he had pulled from the wreck days earlier. It was still locked tight, the clasp unyielding, but the drive had given him enough. Names, manifests, video. A trail of blood and corruption that led straight to Miranda Locke and her empire of polished evil. Outside, the trees were too quiet. The birds had gone. Even the squirrels had vanished. Rook rose first, his ears pressed flat, his low growl so deep it vibrated the floorboards. Gabriel froze. Then he heard it too, the soft crunch of boots on dead leaves, slow, measured, too deliberate for hunters or hikers. "Down," he whispered. Rook slid behind the oak table, his body still as stone. Gabriel reached for his rifle, then hesitated. A gun would only buy time. This wasn't a stand-and-fight situation. He needed to move. The laptop, the drive, the pilot's note, everything had to come with him. A thud slammed into the front door. Not a knock, something heavier. The wood groaned. Dust rained down from the rafters. Another slam, harder. A crack opened in the doorframe. Rook barked, one sharp warning, and the world erupted. Gunfire burst through the windows in splinters of glass and thunder. Gabriel dove behind the stone hearth, clutching the laptop and rucksack. Bullets shredded the back wall, tore through old blankets and shelves of canned food. Another blow hit the door. Gabriel turned to Rook, pointed toward the rear window. "Go!" The dog bolted, leaping through the frame with the precision of muscle and instinct. Gabriel grabbed the rucksack, slung it across his back, and followed, shattering what remained of the glass with his elbow. He hit the earth outside in a crouch, rolled, and sprinted into the trees. Behind them, the cabin howled in pain, wood groaning, bullets hammering the walls like fists of iron. They didn't look back. In the foothills beyond town, Claire Jennings stood beneath a broken sign that read, "Whispering Pines Cemetery." The message on her burner phone had been simple. "If you want the truth, look where no birds sing." Below it, GPS coordinates. She had followed them here, boots crunching gravel, camera slung around her neck. The wind had shifted, and with it came silence, complete and uncanny. No rustling, no bird calls, only the hush of breath and a distant metallic scent on the air. She crouched by the tree line, pulling out a printed copy of the original shipping manifest she'd found weeks ago. One she'd thought was a fake, but the coordinates matched. The drone she heard on the call, the equipment Aegis claimed to have retired. It all pointed towards something hidden deep in these woods. Claire didn't know it yet, but she was only a few miles from where Gabriel had first found the helicopter. By twilight, Gabriel and Rook had put miles between themselves and the cabin. The forest closed behind them like a wound, swallowing all trace. Gabriel moved through the undergrowth like a phantom, his boots silent on pine needles, his breath measured and low. Rook trotted beside him, his ears tilted to the wind, alert to every gust and snap of twig. The dog had saved his life more than once, and tonight, his instincts kept them one step ahead. They crossed a frozen creek, waded through waist-high ferns, and ducked into a gulch that offered concealment beneath the shadow of high cliffs. Gabriel finally stopped near a rock overhang and dropped to one knee. His chest heaved, not from panic, but from focus. He hadn't felt this alive since his last deployment. He laid the pack in front of him, unzipped it, and pulled out the drive. Rook laid down beside him, pressing close for warmth and steadiness. Gabriel looked at the stars overhead, sharp, cold, unblinking. Somewhere out there, powerful people were hunting him. And the worst part? They wouldn't come with questions. He opened the laptop again, the screen a faint glow in the growing dark. He navigated deeper into the drive, past the files he'd seen before. A new folder caught his eye. Nav, log, partial. It opened to a string of gibberish, corrupted data, until the last line, a set of GPS coordinates. Gabriel copied them down, heart pounding. Rook sat up again, head tilted. The wind had changed. Gabriel looked toward the black trees behind them. A faint hum vibrated through the ground, low, steady, rising. Another drone. He powered off the laptop instantly and buried it beneath pine needles. He and Rook pressed flat into the earth. Above them, a flicker of movement swept across the stars. When the drone passed, they remained still. Only when the wind returned and the hum vanished did Gabriel dare breathe again. He turned to Rook and whispered, "They're not giving up." The shepherd thumped his tail once in acknowledgement. Gabriel closed his eyes for a moment, not to rest, but to think. The game had changed. He wasn't surviving anymore. He was being hunted. But he had a direction now. Coordinates, a second location, a place where perhaps more evidence had been hidden. And someone needed to hear the truth. He didn't know Claire Jennings's name, not yet. But he would. The mountains had never looked this raw, every ridge jagged with ice, every wind laced with warning. On the 6th night since his cabin burned, Gabriel Harlow stood beneath a gnarled pine, breath clouding in the cold as he studied the laminated map in his hand. The GPS coordinates from the recovered data pointed toward a cave system tucked deep into the northern edge of the Bitterroot Range, an old mining corridor called Widow's Pass, long sealed off by landslides and disrepair. Behind him, Rook stood watchful, tail lowered, nostrils flaring into the wind. The German shepherd had slept little, moved silently, and eaten only what Gabriel forced into his bowl. He was more than a dog now. He was the shield between Gabriel and death. They moved before dawn. The climb was brutal, slick stone, unstable snow, and branches that lashed against their faces. But Gabriel was no stranger to harsh terrain. He had scaled worse cliffs under enemy fire, and now he had something worth more than orders. He had truth. At mid-morning, they reached the cave mouth, a split in the stone, half covered in snow and thick with mist. Rook was the first to step in, ears perked. Gabriel followed, flashlight beams sweeping through the gloom. Just beyond the first bend, half buried in scree, was a military-grade Pelican case. His fingers shook as he flipped the latches. Inside, waterproof sealed hard copies of manifests, handwritten instructions, a second encrypted memory drive, and at the bottom, an envelope with a name written in block letters, Claire Jennings. Gabriel exhaled slowly. "So you knew someone would come," he murmured, speaking to the long-dead pilot whose quiet courage had triggered this reckoning. "You knew how this would go." He pocketed the envelope. It was time. Miles away, in her cluttered newsroom, Claire Jennings' phone buzzed. The number was scrambled, bouncing through so many signals it looked like static. She picked up. "Claire Jennings." A pause. Then, "I have what you've been looking for." His voice was low, rough, tired. "Who is this?" "Gabriel Harlow. I have physical and digital evidence on Miranda Locke and Aegis Security. Shipping manifests, audio files, internal memos, all verified." Claire stood slowly. "How do I know this isn't a setup?" "I know what you heard on that call. The drone hum, the silence in the trees. I've been running from it. I've lost everything to stay alive. I have the drive, and I have a note from someone who trusted you with it." He gave her the name, the coordinates, the meeting point. She didn't ask why she believed him. She simply said, "I'm on my way." They met beneath a fire tower on the edge of the national forest just past dusk. The air smelled of rusted iron and melting snow. Claire parked her car with the lights off, boots crunching as she stepped out. Gabriel emerged from the shadows, with Rook at his side, muzzle flecked with snow. They regarded each other for a long, silent moment. Neither needed to explain what they had risked to be there. Gabriel handed her the Pelican case. "You'll need secure channels. This goes deeper than one company. These documents name officials, politicians, private contractors." Claire opened the envelope with her name. It was a letter from Captain Reeve. "If this is in your hands, then I've failed. But I trust you, Claire. You still care about the truth. Get it out. Get it to the world." Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steel. "We don't run anymore," she said. Gabriel shook his head. "No, we make them run." 2 days later, Claire released the first file, not to one paper, but to dozens. A massive exposé, mirrored across platforms, unhackable, unstoppable. Newsrooms around the country ran with it. Aegis exposed, private military giant linked to illegal arms trade. Photos, memos. Audio clips of Miranda Locke's voice calmly negotiating weapons sales with international buyers. Documents that linked her to backdoor political contributions, falsified shipping orders, and the silencing of multiple whistleblowers. The media storm was immediate. Protests surged. Congressional hearings were demanded. The FBI, pushed by public outcry and undeniable evidence, raided Aegis headquarters and Locke's private estate in Virginia. She was arrested at dawn. Her face, once featured in glossy leadership magazines, now filled news reports beneath bold headlines. The Queen of War Crimes, from corporate power to prison cell. Gabriel didn't return to town. He watched the news from a borrowed satellite phone, sitting beside Rook under the stars. A week later, a government jeep pulled up near a temporary ranger station where Gabriel had camped. 2 men stepped out, one in a windbreaker marked with the Department of Defense insignia, the other a man in civilian clothes with sharp features and weary eyes. "Mr. Harlow," the civilian said, "I'm here on behalf of Captain Reeves' family. They want you to know. His name has been cleared, posthumous honors, and your service here. It will not be forgotten." Gabriel only nodded. "That's not why I did it." "I know." The man handed him a sealed envelope. "There's also something else. Funds, compensation, from an emergency contingency fund Reeves set aside years ago. You and your dog won't be starting from scratch." Gabriel glanced at Rook, who was sniffing the man's boots cautiously. "He doesn't care about money. He just wants a safe place to sleep." 2 months later, the snow had melted into spring. A new cabin stood where the old one had burned, built with care and quiet hands. The porch was broad and sunlit. Wind chimes whispered against the eaves. Inside, the laptop was gone, replaced by paper books, wooden, furniture, and a new purpose. Gabriel stood at the porch railing with a mug of hot coffee, watching Rook chase butterflies in the tall grass. A car pulled up the gravel road. Claire stepped out, hair loose in the breeze, a copy of the Pulitzer-nominated article in her hand. "I owed you a visit," she said, "and a copy." Gabriel took it, flipping through the pages. "You made it count." She smiled. "We made it count." They sat together as the sun sank below the ridges, two quiet warriors who had survived something few ever would. Behind them, the forest stood tall, no longer hiding monsters, and at their feet, a German shepherd lay stretched in the sun, tail flicking gently. The weight of the past finally lifted. Sometimes God sends his angels not with wings, but with 4 legs and a heart full of loyalty. In a world where shadows often fall heavy, a single act of courage, a dog's bark, a soldier's choice, a stranger's trust, can turn darkness into light. This story reminds us that no secret can stay buried forever, and no evil can withstand the truth when it is guided by faith. Maybe you've felt like Joe, lost, tired, running from something no one else can see. Or maybe you've been like Arrow, sensing danger before it arrives, standing guard when others look away. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment with where you're watching from. And if you believe in God's protection, type Amen below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of redemption, loyalty, and miracles in unlikely places. May God bless you and keep you safe, wherever you are.